This is Rashid Abu Al-Sam reporting from Houston, Texas, and this will be your daily digest of what I think of the latest headlines. Now, in Gaza, thousands upon thousands of displaced Palestinians have been making their way back to North Gaza after Israel pushed them all the way down to the southern tip of Gaza during the Gaza-Israeli war. And it's just wonderful seeing their happy faces, and they're laughing, and they're so happy, even though they're going back to a destroyed landscape. There's just nothing left, just rubble. They're going to have to live in tents as they rebuild their homes, and we can only wish the best for them. U.S. President Donald Trump's recent comments saying that he thought the Palestinians in Gaza could be moved temporarily or permanently to both Egypt and Jordan is really a non-starter for most of the world. For decades and decades, anti-Palestinian Israelis have said the same thing. They were like, oh, why don't you just push them into Jordan? It's right next door to the West Bank. But Jordan is Jordan, and it's for the Jordanians, and they have their king. And Palestinians who were born and have lived, for centuries in Palestine and now stuck in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, they don't want to live in Egypt or in Jordan. It's just, Trump is just repeating this common Zionist trope of, oh, that's how we'll easily solve this. And, many non-Arab people have consistently criticized Arab countries, saying, oh, why isn't Saudi Arabia taking Palestinian refugees? Why doesn't, Morocco take them in? Why doesn't, Oman take some? But the whole point is that all the Arab nations under the Arab League decided decades ago that they weren't going to allow huge numbers of Palestinian refugees into their territories, because then Israel would claim victory and a state of Palestine would never happen. So it's really unfortunate that President Trump is repeating these very, very tired tropes about pushing out the Palestinians and that it will be better for them. He, as a real estate mogul, has a greedy eye on Gaza because he said it's all rubble now. And some Israeli businessmen have, come up with, they've come up with mock-ups of how Gaza could be turned into a luxury tourism enclave, if Israel occupied it and owned it and got rid of those pesky Palestinians who don't want to play ball with them in their, in their war of genocide. So, Trump, you got it wrong. The whole controversy between Colombia and the United States over how Colombian overstayers were being deported back to Colombia and Brazilian overstayers were being sent back to Brazil in shackles and in handcuffs blew up over the weekend when the Colombian president, Petro, announced that he wasn't going to allow 2 U.S. military planes to land with Colombian overstayers because they were being treated inhumanely. That set Trump off into a rage, and he threatened tariffs of 25% on all Colombian exports to the U.S., and after a week, those tariffs would go up to 50%. Now, Colombia has the U.S. as its major export market for flowers, fresh flowers, cut flowers, and it's coffee. 20% of the coffee imported into the U.S. comes from Colombia, and most of the flowers sold, across the nation here are from Colombia. And with Valentine's Day just around the corner, I think both sides sort of balked at that. They finally came to an agreement. President Petro of Colombia declared victory, and of course President Trump declared victory for the U.S. The U.S. has allegedly agreed to not send Colombian deportees on military flights. They're going to use commercial flights instead, or non-military flights, and I don't know if they're going to be handcuffed or not. Also, over the last weekend, a plane load of Brazilian deportees went through a really bad time with their American captors. They were flown from Louisiana. Their plane had lots of technical, mechanical problems. The Brazilians on board the plane said there was even a mechanic on board. The plane was so in need of, repair. And the plane had to make an unscheduled stop in Panama City because they were having engine troubles. And the Brazilian passengers said they could, see smoke coming out of one of the engines, and that in the end, one of the engines was turned off. And when they landed in Panama, they had to turn off the air conditioning several times while they were doing the repairs on the plane. And all the Brazilians were handcuffed and shackled at the feet and at the stomach. And they said it got very, very hot, and they didn't have enough water given to them. And they did give them some food, but they said it wasn't very good. It was more like snacks. And then the plane took off, and then it had more problems, and it had to stop in Manaus in the Brazilian Amazon. And there they had to turn off the air conditioning again to try and do some more repairs. This is when a mutiny happened on board. The passengers were totally fed up. They got up. They were beaten by the security guards on the plane, some really viciously. I saw a picture of one Brazilian guy who had this huge, slash mark on his back. And some of them managed to open an emergency exit door over one of the wings. And lots of them ran out onto the wing and started screaming, Polícia Federal, Polícia Federal. They wanted the Brazilian Federal Police to come rescue them. And the Brazilian Federal Police had to sort of fight their way onto the plane. And that's when they decided that all the passengers had to leave the plane, because this plane was supposed to continue on to Belo Horizonte in Minas Gerais, where most of these overstayers were from, originally, from that state of Minas Gerais. So they ordered all the Brazilians unshackled and unhandcuffed, and the Brazilian Federal Police had to fly in one of their planes to later fly all of these people to Belo Horizonte. The Brazilian government investigated, and they complained officially to the U.S. about these deportees being maltreated. Brazilian analysts did admit that Brazilian overstayers do regularly come back from the U.S. on these deportation flights in handcuffs. So that was nothing new, really, but them being beaten and screamed at all the time was, a basic violation of human rights. So let's see how this goes from here. Latin American countries are meeting this week at a summit, I think in Guatemala, to discuss all of these issues of Trump and the mass deportations. But I did also read somewhere that there are more than 200,000 illegal Brazilians in the United States. So it's a huge problem, both for Latin American countries and for the U.S. And I think through talking to one another, having constant consultations, they can come to an agreement to deport these people in a more humane way.